did read the May 3rd. I did read May 3rd minutes, and I was fine with those minutes. So you're right.
Okay.
May 8th. That was, yeah. Okay.
I don't know that we have to capture those necessarily beyond
Yeah.
having those
You're right.
written out.
You're right.
Okay.
Okay. Excellent. All right.
One additional attendee. Okay, so we have a second for that? Second for
I'll
the
second. Yep.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay. So minutes for May 3rd are approved as submitted. So I think, Jane, since you've had the distinction in the last few days of being introduced to Sam offline and talked about kind of the topic for today and the material, if you would be so kind as to start the introduction and start us off here.
Sure. Happy to do that. And Sam, just as a repeat of what Kyle just said, we're really very grateful that you can be with us, and we'll take as much time as you have, and if you're time limited, that's okay. We totally understand. So I'm just going to, as you know, fellow commissioners, Sam and I had a very introductory conversation about what we are aiming to do as a committee of the full commission, in terms of making a recommendation of some, of some meaningful language that would acknowledge, the presence of Coast Salish peoples in what is the county for Millennium, and serving, serving a recognition of that in a manner that's appropriate and respectful, and is informed by someone such as himself in terms of Sam, and his appreciating his knowledge of just the diversity of the tribes that live in this area, and the uniqueness of them all, and how they how they intersect at times and interact, and so we just had that very preliminary conversation. I just gave you a bit of a verbal brief of it last time, and then I think we all agreed that we wanted to invite Sam to speak with us a little bit about his views on what could be appropriate in terms of establishing any kind of connection between the people who live here and the Coast Salish peoples, recognizing that Coast Salish peoples are nations unto themselves with sovereignty that is really on the level of the federal government and not at our local level. So we need to be mindful of that. And we wanted to explore with Sam, what could this county meaningfully do to sort of acknowledge the heritage of Coast Salish peoples in the area, and recognizing their land, their nations, and those manner of things. So Sam, I sent these points to you last night, and did you get a chance to look at them, and do you want to just start off speaking about your thoughts on those issues that I raised with you, and we sort of take it from there?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you all for this work that you're doing. It's really it's a really good time to do it. It's been I guess when you think about time in general, Coast Salish peoples have been there and these lands and these islands since time immemorial, and it's really just a small blip in time that our people has not been out there in numbers and strength of community, and it's been something that's hard on our communities, and I think it's something that's really hard on the ecological communities out there as well, and the heart of the land and the spirit of the land. And so I think really a good time for communities to heal, all the communities, the natural communities and the human communities out there. And so I'm really thankful for this work that you're all doing, and I'm really honored that you've considered to talk to me about this. It's something that I think about a lot. I'm Deputy Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Stillaguamish tribe. And so I do a lot of this sort of cultural resource stuff and kind of government to government stuff in my full-time job. And I am also a co-manager of a intertribal Coast Salish Youth Stewardship Corps. So we do like environmental conservation work with the intertribal youth group. And that's really the intention there, is to get these tribes, multiple tribes that have ancestral ties to the San Juan Islands, to get them back out in the islands, working collaboratively together to restore these cultural landscapes. And I am a Samish tribal citizen myself, and I grew up on Lopez. I went to school in Seattle at the University of Washington and got a Bachelor's of Science in Resource Management. And I'm a canoe skipper as well. So I think about these kinds of things from the angle of cultural resources and natural resources and healing communities and tribes working together. And the San Juan Islands are a place that has a really deep intertribal collaborative history. The resources that people gather there, the camas fields and the salmon runs that came through there were such a large bounty of foods and medicines that tribes realized that it was more beneficial for people to work together to be able to process all these resources and just divide the resources and bring them back to their winter villages. So there was a lot of intermarital ties between the tribes that led to a lot of extended family traveling to these islands in the summertime to harvest the camas and to work the reef nets and then process and smoke the fish and the camas for winter food stores. And so I think that's really interesting, because even today, the population in the islands doubles in the summer times. And it's always been like that. Since time immemorial, the population has doubled or tripled in the San Juan Islands in the summer times, which I just think is fascinating, the power of place and how that thread is continued throughout all of eternity in those islands. And so, I think there's a lot of efforts kind of like this. There's a lot of efforts right now, land back movements, land acknowledgement movements. There's a lot of social awareness that's happening now, and a lot of people becoming aware of the history, the good and the bad. And so we get these questions a lot in our tribal communities, and it's really good. I think it's really, really good. I'm really glad the work's being done. And I read through the questions, and some of the kind of general recommendations I might put out to this group, and I'd be happy to dive into more specifics. But the general thing that I think is good for people to remember in these positions is that there's been a lot of historical tactics to divide tribes, sort of divide and conquer strategies, that a lot of federal policies that have drawn lines between tribes and created incentives for tribes to fight amongst each other over scarce resources, namely fisheries and casinos, have really created a lot of conflict between tribes. And so I think that early colonial times, that was really done very intentionally. And I think that as a point of healing, and I think that's what this group is trying to do. It's really important to put intention into not dividing tribes any more than has already been done by federal policy, and to be sure to be as inclusive as possible to these tribes that all have ties to these lands. And sort of the biggest players right now that tend to acknowledge their ties to these islands and have put a lot of effort and put a lot of effort in lately are Samish, Lummi, Swinomish, Jamestown, S'Klallam, and Tulalip. So those 5 tribes are still active today and still in existence today, and recognized treaty tribes that consider the government trustees of their land, and that the federal government and county governments have a trustee relationship with and an onus to engage in collaboration. So those tribes are each their own individual sovereign nations, and this is where I see different groups kind of struggle with sometimes, as they want a representative on the board or whatever to represent all of these Coast Salish tribes, and people they don't quite realize that like each one of these tribes needs its own representative, that it's impossible for me as a Samish tribal citizen to speak for Lummi or Tulalip. I can't say that I can speak for them or know what their respective councils would want to do. Myself as a Samish tribal citizen who works for Stillaguamish, I wouldn't even be able to speak for Samish. As a Stillaguamish employee, I still have to respect the Samish Council's autonomy, and me as a single tribal citizen can't speak for the Samish Council either. And there's been for example, the National Monument Advisory Committee and the San Juans through the BLM, they tried for a few years to have a tribal representative. And after a period of time, it became abundantly clear that each tribe needs to be allowed to sit in on those meetings, and each tribe needs to be allowed to have its own voice. And so that I do understand that can kind of create a committee within a committee, and that creates more logistics for planning meetings and all of this stuff that we're all aware of. It has its complications, but it's really the best way to do it right. So yeah, because you don't want to get into a situation where you're playing favorites with one or two tribes. That's not really creating a healing atmosphere. That's really perpetuating.
Are you muted?
We got you. You're back.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and so let's see here. Yes, that was pretty good. Maybe I'll just pause there before I go on to another subject, and maybe people might have feedback or questions along that topic.
Okay. Any questions from the floor so far?
I'm okay for now, because yeah, this is quite reflective of our conversation last Sunday. So Sharon or Kyle, maybe you guys have some questions.
Well, right. The only question I have is, I was making a note of the tribes that you listed that have a strong history with the San Juan Islands, and I think you said the S'Klallam tribe. That was the one I wasn't sure I got right.
Yes, Jamestown, S'Klallam.
Oh, that's one tribe.
Yes, Jamestown, S'Klallam is one tribe.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And the last one, Sam,
Tulalip.
it was Tulalip? Okay. All right,
Yeah.
gotcha. Okay.
And would you mind listing those 5 again for us? It'll be in the notes, but
Yeah, so Samish, Lummi, Swinomish, Jamestown, S'Klallam, Tulalip,
okay.
and sometimes Stillaguamish, sometimes not so Amish. So Amish has been really involved in the National Parks Visitor Center.
Okay.
And we're involved. We're involved out there too. So yeah, I guess you could include still Amish there too, I guess.
I asked that question just to review. One of the questions that I have in working, so it turns out the San Juan County has done some of this work. The Environmental Resources Division has a and I can put it on the screen. I don't want you to try and read fine print while you're going 54 miles an hour, but I don't know if you've seen that before. But you know, much of the research that I've done, and I'm a person who is interested. We're all interested in doing it right, and figuring out how to I don't know. All the words end up just so they fall sort of flat. I think we all want to try and expand inclusion, among other things. And one of the drawbacks, I think, to the land acknowledgement question is covering language. Like the reading that I've done, Coast really refers more to a family of languages more than necessarily the tribe specifically. And I'm not sure if that's your impression, but does it make more sense to try and describe specific people or nations, tribes, as opposed to
So in terms of land acknowledgements, this is a really tricky one, and people are usually very, very surprised and thrown off. Is that I definitely encourage people to not list individual nations on land acknowledgements.
Okay.
For a number of reasons. One, it just gets really political, and the intention is not to be political, but to be healing and acknowledging the millennia of ancestors. And there was a time that these tribes weren't named by Lummi or Tulalip or Samish. There was a time that they weren't called that, and so really, it's kind of disrespectful to the even more ancient, the super ancient tribes that didn't go by the modern names. And people married in all across the state. I mean, there's Yakima people and stuff that were crossing the pass and marrying into these Coast Salish tribes in the islands, and really they would deserve an honorable mention there too, as people that would shape this place. And how do you start to list all of those and be inclusive? So generally in land acknowledgements, I just say a simple phrase of all Indigenous peoples that have ancestral ties to this land.
With that language, essentially. So not Coast Salish, but all Indigenous people.
There's mixed feelings about Coast Salish, but I would say all Indigenous peoples that have ancestral ties. That's a catch-all. That's a catch-all. And Coast Salish is a language group for sure, and some people don't really like the term because they think it's just very cold and academic as a way to describe people. But I don't know. I don't have a problem with it personally, but I know some people do. So.
Well, thank you for that part, because that's an open question that I appreciate people have struggled with in the past, and I appreciate that it maybe in an effort to try and get it right, it is too narrow and sometimes maybe too wide. So I appreciate your Sharon, you had your hand up.
Oh yeah, just to say that I've looked online, and if you look in what tribes have a history in the San Juan Islands, you'll find Nooksack, you'll find Songhees. So it gets tricky if you're gonna put some maybe don't have as strong ties and leave out others that do, and
exactly. And then there's all the tribes on the Canadian side of the border that are often left out as well, and and that they have a very, very deep history too.
And interaction between prior to the borders being created, right?
Yeah, and along the lines of land acknowledgements, I've heard another another term for them, land acknowledgement / statement of commitment. And the statement of commitment, I think, is what, you know, makes it go beyond being a trendy land acknowledgement. I think land acknowledgements in and of themselves can run the risk of being just, you know, lip service, just empty words that, you know, don't do anything more than a dusty old history book does, as far as you know, doing something or having real action that creates healing. And so I always encourage people in their land acknowledgement to consider including some kind of commitment in there. And for every organization, that is different. So it's really up to you to think about what you can do to you know, more authentically raise awareness of the existence of Coast Salish people, or more authentically give Coast Salish people a voice in contemporary issues in the place. And that's exactly what you're doing. You might you're working toward to a voice.
Sam, you're in a spot maybe that we lost you for 10 or so seconds there. Can you start that thread again?
Oh,
Sorry.
okay.
I think we know where you are on Highway 20.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yes, so the land acknowledgements, I highly encourage people to include a statement of commitment in their land acknowledgements. And that makes it be more than just empty lip service. And so every group, you know, is different and might have a different commitment that they can make. But, you know, a group like this, you know, maybe your commitment is to, you know, finding ways for Coast Salish people to authentically have a voice and, you know, within the county government. Or I'm not sure. You can phrase that better than I can, but yeah, a statement of commitment is good. Giving people a voice in the contemporary, you know, dialogue.
So, Mr. Chair, can I ask Sam a
Yes,
question?
please,
Follow-up
please.
question to that. So, and I think I explained this, Sam, when we talked on last weekend, that what we have the opportunity to do is propose some structural amendments to our charter that will trigger, you know, it could trigger the passage of a resolution or an ordinance, or it could trigger the creation of a body within the government. And so I'm wondering, you know, when I listen to you talk, it strikes me as being so darn important to get this right. And so, you know, it would not, I don't think, serve us well in the timeline we have to strike a statement of commitment that hasn't been adequately and appropriately consulted with the peoples who would be implicated in that, and without consulting as to, well, what voice would you like to have, and what voice, you know, and because what we've been reminded of is that even to speak with an elder or a leader of one of these nations is, we've been informed that, you know, hierarchically we're pretty insignificant, you know, and so it would be with the utmost of arrogance to think that that any of these you know, tribal nations would even want to have a voice. So so I'm wondering, you know, we have precious time left to you know, to put our proposed recommendations forward, and so I wonder if, you know, putting forward a placeholder for this that is picked up by the county government might not be more appropriate. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. You know, kind of along the lines of what I was saying earlier, like it's I can't really speak for everyone else, so it wouldn't be bad to you know, check in with people before making that commitment, and to make sure that they're on board with being committed to that as well. That's not a bad thought, for sure.
Yeah. But we could still be saying something about land acknowledgement / statement of commitment in the charter, perhaps.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Okay.
Sam, I have a follow-on question. Do you, when you think of somebody or a group of people or a political entity that's doing a better job or even doing it right or on the right path, are there any people we can learn from? Any
Yes. Yeah.
levels of government that we can learn from?
Yeah, for sure. National Parks has been having really amazing, successful collaborative conversations with tribes, and we have sort of a little work group between the interested tribes out there. And Joe Dolan and Alexis Freedy out there at San Juan National Historical Park have been doing an amazing job, and it would definitely be worth picking their brains a little bit just about how that process has been going and how they set up the precedent for the collaborations and conversations to be so successful. And yeah, it would be worth talking to them for sure.
So when you reference NPS, is it the monument or the bigger or somebody? I know Lexi and some of the other people. You mean the San Juan group more than the region or a wider?
Yes, I mean
wider
yes,
group. Okay.
I mean Lex and Joe Dolan, her
Okay.
the Native American liaison there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Do you know how to be in touch with those folks, Kyle, or do we need a contact from them?
No, probably Mr. Dolan by way of Alexis, but yeah, I think I can get through to both of them, and would love to talk to them sooner than later.
Interestingly, Sam, you know, when this example was mentioned in our meeting last week, because I told the fellow commissioners that you talked about that, Kevin had caught wind somewhere that someone didn't feel, a tribal member did not feel that happy with that collaboration, and that's just one voice, right? He didn't even mention the tribe that voice came from. So I just, you know, I mean, to your point that not everybody can be satisfied, I suppose, right?
Yes. Yeah, I think so. And I think that the important thing there is the government to government relationship, because we're national parks has been on a government so that have involved in that collaboration are all involved and appointed by the respective tribal councils to interface with the federal government, essentially. So it's a very official government to government collaboration, and understandably there might be, you know, some individuals within the tribes that might not be happy for various reasons, in the same sense that, you know, a U.S. representative appointed at a UN council, you know, can't speak for every American citizen, but they're appointed by the government and they have that responsibility.
Gotcha.
And I think that is, you know, especially I think that in terms of what you all are doing, being involved in a county government, you're going to want the government to government relationship with each tribe.
Okay.
Sometimes that might mean, you know, a tribal council might appoint, you know, a TIPO within the tribal staff to be the liaison, or, you know, they might even appoint, you know, someone from a cultural department, or they might appoint someone from a natural resource department. Every tribe kind of has their own structure and how they balance their workload. And I will say that every tribe's workload is consistently insane. Very, very high workload, not a whole lot of staff, and a lot of different hats. And so, so each tribe is different. So you might get a cultural person from one tribe, a natural resource person. But that's really up to the tribal council and their own tribal administration. And you can't make everyone happy.
Right, exactly. I had a follow-on question and it just zipped out of my brain. I I remembered it. Am I allowed to ask it?
Please, yes, go ahead.
Okay. Sam, when we spoke, I had talked to you about our intent to create something along the lines of a justice and equity and inclusion commission that would be citizen-led, and the notion that it would be nice to have tribal representation on that body from tribes that might be interested in sitting on it. Can you imagine that there would be tribal councils that would have an interest in having a voice at such a table that was made up largely of, residents of the community and less sort of county government officials, although there would be a few of those. I mean, so could you imagine that there could be any interest in that?
I guarantee it. Yeah, I definitely guarantee it. And I think that, especially if you're talking in terms of more of like a citizen kind of grassroots kind of organization, I think there'd be a lot of tribal citizens too, if it's not necessarily a government to government type level, but a citizen type level. I think that would be really valuable as well. Sort of like a counterpart to the higher level government thing. And I'm sure that there'd be membership from each of the tribes that would probably be interested. I know that the Lopez Island Family Resource Center has been doing something like that. They've been hosting brunches for just tribal citizens from Samish and Swinomish, I think mostly. And it's been really great. I mean, tribal peoples need to be out there more, and I think that it's a really big step and a really healing step for local island organizations to sort of take it upon themselves to find ways to make that happen. And that includes like, finding housing, because tribes don't have their own land out there anymore, and helping out with the ferry costs and stuff. On a citizen level, that is really awesome. It's really great. And there's a lot more like authentic relationships that can be built sometimes, not sort of within the governmental structures. And there's huge value to that too. So yeah, that's a really great question. I'm really glad you bring that up. Like, I'm talking about how important it is to have that official line of communication, but it's just as important to have a grassroots line of communication too, where more personal ties can be built.
That would, I think that would probably be our vision. We'll want to talk about that more as a committee. Yeah. But I hear what you're saying, and I talked briefly with Barbara Schulstis last week about the work that they're doing in that regard, and how deeply important, at the same time deeply sensitive that work is. So okay, well, I'm glad I asked that question. Yeah. Okay. No, that's very helpful. That gives us something to talk about. I mean, you can get something to deliberate as a committee. I mean, but you can get very tripped up with red tape when you start doing this government to government stuff. And I've experienced a heck of a lot of that in my work. And sometimes you can have very meaningful grassroots interactions that can trigger, stuff that can meaningfully happen at a governmental level.
Definitely.
Yeah,
that is awesome. And then if you're just kind of being intentional about making sure it's not just one or two tribes on there, but just trying to get a few more.
Yep.
And also, sometimes all you can do is put out the invitation and hope that people
Shoot. Well, Sam, if you're still hearing, there you are. Yep. Okay, you froze in the providing for your child. That's great.
Sorry, I just wanted to follow on quickly with what Sam just said, please. Kyle, if you don't mind, is just, I think the way to do that outreach, because you can imagine you'd put that invitation out and it goes nowhere. I think you'd want to work the systems more and interact with, for example, the Barbara Schulstis for LIFRC, and then her counterparts on San Juan and Orcas, and say, what kinds of relationship do you have with citizens from residents from different tribes, and can you help us to do that outreach and explore interest in being a part of the body.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah. So don't start from nowhere if some work, meaningful outreach has already been done that's been somewhat successful. Poor guy.
Yeah, totally.
I'd love to hear the song in the background. I think there's some, it looks like there's some singing in the process. So maybe, down the road, or I guess right now I'm sort of struggling with, creating space and potentially opening, having positions or encouraging the county to take more action, to be more inclusive, create that space, have positions, and then how to make sure, because the Family Resource Center is a great idea. It's one of many potential, sources of connectivity. But I guess, I don't know if there's an answer, Sam, actually, but making that distinction between the high level and needing to consider tribal council level people, or lots of some of the different nations residents or members live in the county. Are people likely to show interest and sort of respond to openings on committees or councils, or what's your sense of that? Is that question clear?
Yeah, I think so. Do you mean tribal folks that live in San Juan County currently?
Well, that plus, so I guess the question I'm getting at is, at what level does a member of one of the nations feel obligated to get permission from the council, or to approach it that way? Are people inclined? So if we add 6 new positions on a Justice and Equity Commission, and we want to kind of target representation that's not currently there and expand that, if we just create the space, is that enough, or is there a need to make a distinction that it's not meant to be a council level position or a government, because some of those things will advise county governance, and some of them are they're more operative. So like, let's review how the county does or doesn't focus on discriminatory issues, and that's more of a subject matter approach, as opposed to a writing governance. And I just want to make sure, to the get it right part, I just want to make sure we think about that, and we word what we need to as we open that up.
Yeah, that is a tough question. That is tough. I guess, like, would the rest of the committee be just kind of everyday citizens, civilians of the San Juans?
Jane can probably talk about it more fully, but I think when we're thinking about it, they're all citizens. They don't all have to be county residents necessarily, but in some of the cases they're going to be advising county governance, and so there may be an expectation that they're county residents. But we're talking about having better representation of gender issues, of other normally marginalized populations, so people of color, in addition to in trying to expand First Nations or Indigenous cultural issues and voices.
Okay.
Yeah. Just to add on that a bit, Sam, I mean, I think I don't think we would want this body to be heavy in representation from government. We would want it to be more knowledgeable, competent, okay, how do you qualify that? But knowledgeable, interested, committed citizens that want to sit in an advisory a review and advisory role in relation to how the county is living up to its commitments to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so you'd want the people to have the representatives to have that kind of lens stepping onto the commission. And so, no, you would not be having like, you might have one council member representative, you might have the county manager represented. And, you know, we need to go through the list of potential people ourselves to think through, you know, is it, my guess is frankly that it would be, it could very well be a tribal council member that wants to, you know, that it say it is a working level, you know, say such as, you know, yourself, I mean, you have a working level in the job that you do, and someone that can provide meaningful insight isn't necessarily speaking from the authority of a council, of a tribal council, right? But you may be plugged into the tribal council in a way that you bring authentic voice to what you're saying, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. Okay. That helps me understand a lot better. Yeah, I would think that. Yeah, Jetta's just talking on the phone. I'm almost.
Oh, poor girl. Daddy, get off the phone.
Yeah. 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 I think. Yeah, that helps me understand what you're doing a lot better. I think that like, it kind of sounds like, you know, just tribal citizenship would be okay. And would kind of, you know, be able to bring a perspective to the table if that's kind of the more the level, like a citizenship type level that you're looking at. Yeah, I think that would be okay. You know, you also might want to just kind of pose it to tribal staff, also, or just maybe kind of have an avenue there for tribal citizenship who's also tribal staff. You know, maybe you just have kind of like a blend kind of thing.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah. So why don't
But,
hey, Sam, we need to let you go.
yeah.
Mr. Chair, I think we need to kindly let our guest go. But Kyle, I wanted to suggest maybe we share with Sam, you know, once we need to talk about it ourselves, but sort of what we were thinking this body might do, right? How it might be mandated and set up. So that I've put together a draft of that. Maybe once we've looked at it ourselves, we share it with him, get his thoughts on it.
Yeah, I would love to get some more information on his ideas about what would be appropriate for us to start to do, you know, in the county.
Yeah.
Sam, is it okay with you if we continue to converse about our work and some of our goals? Okay.
Yeah.
Is there
I'd love
anything
to.
before? I so appreciate your time today and your perspective. Is there anything that you weren't clear from us about, you know, what the committee's doing or what our goals are?
No, I feel pretty good, and I feel really good about the line of communication too, and that I could reach out to any of you, or yeah.
That's great, and that's for sure true. It's less personal, but you can access all of our county-based emails fairly routinely. And I'm happy that, you know, Jane or Sharon share my direct contact information. I look forward to more conversation with you, and so thank you for your time today. Go to the park or wherever you're headed.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Hopping on the ferry to Gloomas.
Okay.
And please thank your daughter for us.
Yeah. Say bye-bye, sweetheart.
Okay, thank you, Sam.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay,
Take care,
bye-bye.
Sam. Bye-bye. That's great.
Poor guy.
Something tells me that's something of his routine, but just to say that's
No
I
kidding.
think singing in the car, that was so cute.
that's great.
Well, was that
Okay,
helpful, you guys?
Say again.
Was that helpful?
Yeah.
It's helpful, and it does both. It sends me in both directions. This conversation is, you know, to be done anywhere near right. I think it should take, the next group should start now, take 10 years before they deliberate 10 years from now, and have something that's remotely closer. It isn't, you know, I appreciate that the goals I have are not shared by everybody, including the people that they might apply to. And that's a really important lesson. I just feel like, because, or I think I see and hear also that because our community looks like it does and feels like it does most of the time, that there aren't room for voices of people who've been here for millennia, and room for voices for people who live here just like I do, we do, and have a very different lived reality for a number of different reasons. And so, but Sam was a great person to get to know, and very helpful. Sharon.
One thing that I think is very encouraging is that over the last several years, we've had a whole bunch of us have had more interaction with people in the tribes, especially the Lummi Nation. And they're coming here this week. I think they're going to be on Lopez tomorrow, and they're going to be on Orcas tomorrow. They're bringing the totem pole here.
Yeah, it's here this afternoon.
Oh, it's this afternoon.
It's here on San Juan this afternoon.
On this afternoon.
Yeah.
As soon as the meeting is over, I want to go see it in the ferry line.
Oh,
Linnea was going to go watch it, and I'm encouraging my husband, and I think I'm going to put it on, make sure it's on Lopez Rocks, because I think our website, I think if the Lopez Rocks website, hopefully it is already, but yeah, what an honor, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we've had on Orcas, we've had some real wonderful, powerful truth and reconciliation type events where we just sat and stayed quiet and listened, whether they were speaking in English or they were speaking in Lummi. And, a lot of it came about when we were working together to push back against that proposed coal export terminal at Cherry Point. And we all worked together so hard to make sure that didn't happen. And a lot of the reason it didn't happen was the Lummi's 1855 treaty. But the fact that all of us, European-looking folks had our eyes on it and were filling up every scoping session hearing, every venue that they planned for scoping hearings were over full, and we were, writing in comments and making comments it was, we did it all together, and that was very powerful, and it started to establish some trust there.
Wow. Yeah. Excellent.
Okay, a couple follow-ups, I think, on that. With your blessing, I'm happy to talk to Alexis and just scope out, just for conversation, I think, for our next time, where her sense is of that work with she's the National Park Superintendent, or the National Monument Superintendent for the county. And I would love to get her sense of that, and just see if, I don't know what my specific questions might be for the long term, but just get just hear her version of how that plays out, and how that came together, how that avenue came together. Is that okay with both of you? Sure.
I'd welcome that. And recognizing, and is an important distinction that he helped us understand, which is that's been very much a government to government interaction, because it's been, the national parks, right? And so that's a federal to tribal, sovereign government interaction. And what we're sort of thinking about is something a little bit, oh darn, Kevin, something a little bit different, right? A little less formal, but so whatever insights you can gain in that regard would be helpful.
Right. Hello, birthday boy.
Is it your birthday?
Oh.
Well, that's why you went away.
Okay, I would like to move us right along for time. So the second item was to review the structure and preparation for our committee report. And thank you to co-chair for working so diligently with such a heartfelt plea to the leadership to get our presentation date moved. So now we're on the 20th of May, which by my calculation is a week from Thursday.
10 days.
10 days. So with that in mind, does anybody have anything else they want to talk about in terms of the presentation? Is there anything you wanted to?
I guess I'm wondering if our plan is to, the table that we've got right now that we're working in terms of issues and proposed amendments and then findings, is that the format we want to use in presenting, or do we want to do something different? I don't know. I don't necessarily have a view on that. I'm interested in hearing what you think.
I feel like the layout works well. It reads pretty easily, and you can see where all of the different pieces that we wanted to kind of tackle from the beginning. And there's a reference back to where some of those fit. I think probably makes sense to maybe bundle, because I think there, even with the land acknowledgement, we may end up doing some kind of recommendation to council for a future ordinance, or somehow giving more power to what's already created, and maybe bunching those together. It's just kind of how they fit line by line, but I like the 3 columns. It works. I think it'll play well on the screen and allow people to ask questions.
Okay. On that point, Kyle, what strikes me is, and I wanted to just share with you all that I had Judy Wolf reached out to me today to say, hey, I'm sorry I haven't gotten back to you to offer any help. Is there anything I can be doing?
Judy Scott?
Yeah, yeah, Judy Scott. Darn it, why do I always get that wrong? Thank you, Sharon. And so it was so kind of her. She just called and said, Jane, is there anything you need me to be doing at this point? And so it enabled us just to have a brief recap discussion. And something she totally reminded me of that's so darn important, and that is the fundamental basis in terms of our finding and our justification and rationale for so much of what we're doing is indeed that resolution 31/2020. And we need to link back to that resolution and make the case that this is only a resolution. And based on the research that we've done, we've recognized the charter needs to support that in structural terms. And that is the rationale for our proposing much of what we're proposing in our because we have the opportunity in charter amendments to do structural things. And that resolution is not structural at all. And in fact, what we're seeing is that, the county government it's challenging for them to know what direction they're meant to move with that resolution. And I think what was some of what we're coming up with proposed amendments is giving them some direction in that regard.
Kevin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the Mississippi River.
Cool.
So Jane, I think you're spot on. I think anywhere we can refer back to the resolution as kind of guidance makes sense. More importantly, because there's a lot of good stuff in that resolution. So let's use it and actually do something with it. Back to the previous point, if you're talking about the presentation being from the kind of spreadsheet that has the columns, I find that the list, just having it listed out works better. Just saying, here's the resolution that we're using to guide a lot of our work, or however you want to phrase that. And then going into, and here's the amendments that we're putting forward. I find, and others have told me that they found when other subcommittees used the spreadsheets that it was a little more complicated to track.
Okay.
So
Fair enough.
Here's the Mississippi River here.
Whoops, sorry. What's that?
I said, but
Is
there's
that
the
Showing off
Mississippi.
the Mississippi.
Is that in Minneapolis?
I'm in Red Wing.
Oh, you're in Red Wing.
Yeah.
I've seen it in many.
It's so easy to swim. Just swim across for us and go touch. What state is that? Wisconsin? Is that Wisconsin over there?
That's Wisconsin. Oh, we did. I had somebody yell at me last night for wearing a mask. And then like hardcore, when I went across the border to Wisconsin, they yelled at me and they told me, what are you, some goddamn Biden voting liberal? And I went, I'm going to go back across the river now. So anyway, but I think the presentation, if just making it simple is best.
And Jane, I don't have strong feelings layout wise. If it makes sense for you, if you can work through the document with with help any other way, I don't know that it matters. So
I'm happy to. I'm happy to do what Kevin's suggesting and find a way of laying it out that is, that's digestible for people. I enjoy doing presentations, and So I'm happy to take that advice and run with it. So
30-slide PowerPoint, get it done.
no, man, you're gonna death by PowerPoint. You mean then in that case? Yeah, no. Hey, that's why I introduced my slick PowerPoint skills in that previous presentation. So I thought people liked it. They liked seeing something different, I think.
I
I
would
could-
agree. Yeah,
I
I
could-
would agree. Okay, anything else about the structure and the committee report prep? We got that covered?
Yeah.
Okay,
Could Kevin remind us, or could somebody remind me when do we have to submit that in advance of the meeting again? Because that's our hard drop deadline.
We don't necessarily have a deadline. I would like to suggest that our committee have something sent to the full commission within,
it's
you know,
3 days, isn't it?
a couple few days before the presentation, so that people don't have an excuse to not read it.
Okay, so that would then be by end of business on Tuesday then.
Yeah,
Okay, COB Tuesday. Okay,
I'm gonna ask this question at the end again, but I'm curious if when we're wrapping things up, if people feel like we need another session before to include the Monday next week, the next meeting, or if we've got it. I feel pretty good about things. I think you're gonna hear from me in a little bit about some of the findings and other contacts and phone follow up may or may not point to an extra work day, but I am keeping that possibility in mind.
mhm. Okay,
Okay,
if we need it, I've got it on the calendar, so.
what
if it's
day would that be? I prefer not to have a working session on the weekend, just because.
okay,
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're
it could just be more time. It could just be a longer meeting next Monday. Any number of things, and we might not need it, but
I don't know if we need a longer meeting, but I mean, we still have our meeting scheduled, I guess is what I was saying, so.
right.
I have a question though for you all that is really at the forefront of my mind, and that is the need to run past Randy out of, to avoid hiccups, our proposed amendments. I'll be very honest in saying I'm really not comfortable going into a full CRC presentation without him having any knowledge of our proposed amendments. I think that would be very foolish and could potentially create major problems for us.
So I'm just gonna chime in, Jane. Thank you. We do not want to do that. It's important to give his office time for some review, which is why I was saying at a minimum of 72 hours for everybody. That would include Randy. However, to have less of a crunch, it would be nice if, if some of our stuff is ready, if we feel like it's actually ready, we could start sending stuff over to his office sooner. The other thing is hopefully Kyle will be coming on board here pretty soon. I'm trying to work out the arrangement right now. And like I sent, Sharon, you didn't see it. I sent an email to the chairs of each subcommittee. It looks like we're going to contract Kyle actually through the prosecutor's office. And he could come on board pretty quickly. And so then they'd have a little more help too. But that review that they'll want to do, or at least a glance, if we can get them stuff sooner than later, that's better.
Yeah, so if you're in agreement, then that is really what I was talking about, actually, was just giving him, like feeding him the, one by one things that we think are ready. And so, for example, the non-discrimination section, we're almost there. I mean, I was just elaborating a little on the findings today, but for my money, that's something we could send tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I think there's a couple of other things as well that we could decide upon at the end of this meeting. And I did send to you, Kevin and Kyle, I don't think, well, yeah, I sent it to all three of you, by the way, as my suggested need for support for Kyle in terms of what we want him to do research-wise and drafting-wise. And I mean, I don't know what kind of time he's going to have if he's not on board, contractually until Wednesday, but we'll take whatever we can from what he can give us.
Yeah, my reason for reaching out on that, and again, sorry, Sharon, you weren't privy to this, but when I reached out to the chairs, I asked what needs they foresaw having from Kyle when he comes on board. Just so you guys know, I'm just trying to make sure he doesn't get slammed. you know, he's doing us a favor, reducing his rate coming in and so on. And so my hope is that we can be expeditious in how we use him. And I'm worried that if we just say every commissioner can just call Kyle with any question, we're going to burn through that $5,000 in a week and have a lot of data not satisfied or a lot of questions not satisfied. So
Sharon.
I just want to know what Jane, what you sent us. I think it's very succinct. I mean, it looks reasonable. I don't have to do the work, but it looks reasonable to me.
Kyle, did you have a look at it, what I sent?
I did. I appreciate all the work you put into it, and I would say the same thing.
So
Yeah,
what,
there will be some, I think there's, so I'll just talk about it now. So partly at Kevin's recommendation, I did reach out to Amy today on the kind of the contracts piece, contracts and how to manage or whether there was some strong avenue toward the business that the county does externally, and whether we can extend some of the same some of our same desires. And she'll have a number of findings. She said tomorrow she needed some time to look at it overnight, but she was excited to be included, I think. And I think that will do some of the, you know, it comes out of that office already. That will be, and that's some of the turf where I didn't have much experience. And I think getting that right for the county will prevent the county from getting into kind of a tight spot. So that'll pull some of that away from any future work for Kyle, I think.
yeah, actually, Kyle, on that point specifically, I just sent what is a very important reference document publicly available for her on that. And I'll forward it to you, and she really should read this, because it's a hold on, I just want to open it. But the Office of the Attorney General,
Is that the I-200 that you sent to me?
no,
Oh,
not
okay.
at all. And it's a very, very powerful sort of opinion that the Office of the Attorney General provided, and I've got it right here. It's called Use of Race or Sex Conscious Measures or Preferences to Remedy Discrimination in State Contracting. And it's an opinion piece prepared by the OAG for the director of the Department of Enterprise Services in Olympia. And it is extremely, it would be extremely valuable to her, and would, for me, just looking at that, they should not be pushing back on what we're proposing by any means whatsoever. So I will forward it to you. If you could please send it to her right away, or I will, and copy you, whatever you wish. But it's a very, very well researched, legally researched piece with, yeah, it's.
I feel like that's what you sent. You didn't send that to me a day ago?
I might have. Did you send it to her then?
No, I haven't. I referenced the I-200, which is actually much less. There wasn't really much in there other than, you know, if you have a federal grant or something like that, somebody who's got like the sheriff has a federal grant, there can be a fair amount of motion toward preferential contract assignments for, you know, a female company or something like that. So, you know, I will send it to her. I didn't
Yeah,
see
it is.
that,
So this
And-
that's
Jane-
track. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to say I'm going to have to run here in a second. I apologize, but I was going to go for a walk with my mom, and she's just walking up. But I just wanted to say that in response to something you said a moment ago, and I don't think you were really suggesting this, but I just want to clarify. I don't think there's any pushback from the prosecutor's office. I think that I had a long conversation with Amy today. I think there's there has been a real effort from them to try and support us. And so I think to Kyle's point, she was probably very pleased to hear from Kyle, because I think they're really wanting to help us put this together. And so I think that AGO, that Attorney General opinion that you have, I think will be very helpful for her.
Absolutely. It does her work for her, essentially. It really does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll talk to you guys soon. Sorry for all my absence this week, but it was good to have family time. So
Can we meet your mom?
Here.
no, she's walking across the grass with my brothers.
Okay.
Over there.
All right.
You guys can
Spoiler.
wave. Hi.
Bye.
Arrivederci, stay out of the river. Make
Bye.
good choices.
Thanks, Kevin. See ya. Okay, well, that was helpful. Okay,
Okay,
so,
if you sent that to me, I'll send it on. We can stop there because we don't have a whole lot of time. I don't want to optimize with. That's just one piece of it. I'm just going to say that is a piece that's maybe taken out of Kyle Loring's wheelhouse, which is good. We're spreading the wealth, spreading the debt.
Exactly.
Sharon,
Exactly.
Just quick question. When you said you had sent that opinion over to her, were you talking about Amy Vera?
Yes,
Okay. Just want to confirm.
and you sent that already?
I'm just sending it to you now.
Okay. Well, if you sent it, I don't need to send it. But if
No,
I don't-
I was gonna send it to you to send to her,
Okay,
but whatever,
perfect.
like, whatever protocol.
That
Yeah,
works great. Yeah, that'll be a good follow on to our conversation.
I think that's
Thank you.
more appropriate, yeah. And then I'm going to, with your permission, committee members, I'm going to send her should I send it to her or Randy, the anti-discrimination thing? What do you recommend?
Randy.
Oh, okay. So why did you choose to tap Amy today?
Well, she's been underutilized directly, and you know, I think that I would like more of. I approached it like the MRSE, more than wanting a specific opinion. I didn't want Randy's opinion yet. I just wanted to see if
Okay.
there was any groundwork yet, or if
Okay,
she had thoughts on, because at this point she's a contributor, not a filter.
gotcha. Thank you. That helps. Okay.
So.
I'm just sending it to you now.
Okay,
And
great.
in format that you can just forward it on to her directly.
All right, so we got about 7 minutes till public comment. I'm happy to move late if we need to. We have 3 more big pieces to chew on. Did you want to all go through your matrix page line by line and discuss the advances and do it that way? Because we also have on there to discuss the composition of the Law and Justice Commission, and then to talk about the county onboarding process. So maybe if we just look at the document, we do that anyway. Is that?
I think so,
Okay.
yeah. I know Sharon did some stuff. I've continued to do some stuff as well in the document.
And so have I. So I guess
So-
we'll all have to share screens for our parts potentially.
I think so, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Well, so we were talking about supportive findings in general. Thanks. I just got that. Anything you want to say in general then about, so if you need to send piecemeal and some of the bigger stuff toward Randy, we should talk at some point about which pieces have sufficient findings and where the work still is. Is that reasonable? Okay,
Mhm.
well, why don't you put up your sort of
I'll do
central document? We can work from there, and I'll show you. I'll fill in, and Sharon, you can fill in where you.
Okay. Yeah, all right, so let me do that now.
Okay, while you're doing that, Linnea, if you can unmute for a second, do you anticipate wanting to talk to us in about 5 minutes or no?
I don't have a lot. I'm just really happy to hear the conversation, glad to be here, and grateful for your sacrifices and all your work. So thank you.
Okay, well, if you do, I'll stop briefly at that moment, and if you don't, we'll just continue to. Thank you.
And by the
Thank you
way,
so much for.
Linnea and I had a useful meeting today on the phone, so it was
Oh,
good.
good.
I checked in with her on something that will come up later, so, yeah. Okay, it's one of the issues on our table here, so I can share with you just the insights that she valuably shared. So can you see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right. Now, so should we just go through one by one, Kyle? Is that how you want to do this?
I think so. Yeah,
Okay.
I think so.
So following my conversation with Judy Scott, got that right, today, I went back into our document and started to think through a little bit, having reminded myself importantly of the text of our resolution 31/2020. I realized that we need to include a line in here that talks about the treatment of residents and indeed visitors in the provision of government services. Adding that in addition to, employment or compensation of county officers or employees. For me, in the language that I was proposing, we didn't make reference to how the county treats the people who live here and who come here. And so for me, that is indeed what actually the resolution talks about. You know, it talks about everybody. And so I thought, well, then we need to ensure that in the provision of services to the people that pay taxes in this county, and indeed in the provision of services to people who even come to this county, there needs to be this kind of treatment. So I wanted to throw that at you and see what you thought.
105%.
Okay.
You know, and I think Kevin made this said something similar just a little bit ago. I think the closer they align, maybe I don't know for the rest of the CRC, but if it's less work and it's you know, it's already sort of tried on and it's out there already. So
Okay.
the alignment is good, I think. Is that
Okay.
true with marital status too then? Because it's in blue?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
Yes, that's why I added that as well. Yeah. I was comparing that language. Okay, so I wanted to let you know I did that. And then I continued to populate. Are you able to see the whole screen? Because you guys are in the way in my view. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna disappear you from my, there we go. So I continue to add some text to this, okay? To you know, indicate where some additional information was obtained, you know, and just bulleted some things there, and then there's some references here, but not there. This isn't finished yet. This is still a work in progress. So why I felt that was important is because, first of all, that's stuff that we don't need Kyle Loring to do for us if we've already done it. And also I just want, you know, I want Randy to be aware that, you know, let's say this goes to court. Well, you know, we certainly have done a heck of a lot of homework into this in terms of why we feel this stands on good ground. Okay.
So for my benefit moving forward, what it looks like, I'm reading and reviewing, you've referenced as often as possible, and not specifically always other charter counties, but at county government levels in Washington, we found this, you or someone or MRSC has found these parallels, and other counties have just beat us to the same work.
Right. Yeah.
Generally. That's
Yeah.
great. Okay.
Yeah. So, you know, if you guys feel that, and Kyle, like, for example, given some of the digging you've done, you know, you want to make reference to what you've dug up, I reckon that's probably, it just puts us on more solid ground.
And do you want to, do you see listing the findings with each issue? Generally, is that how you want to do the presentation? So to continue to do that? Okay.
Yes. Now, I have to be honest, I think what we need to do though is, this will be our master document in which we populate the findings, but there's no way in God's green earth we're going to be able to make this kind of a wordy presentation, okay? So I think we need to consider that. I think we may need to consider having this be a good final document prior to the full commission presentation as an accompaniment to, say, maybe it's a PowerPoint or it's just a more succinct Word document along the lines of what Kevin was suggesting.
I think, Jane, if you send findings as soon as we can, not as soon as we can, but with some extra time buffer, so that, you know, if the findings were fairly well worked out a week ahead, or, you know, even 4 days ahead, if we could send that, that would give, you know, some of the other people chance to kind of look at the background, the justification.
I don't think we're going to be there, and I'd rather send them. I'd rather send them this table, frankly. And
okay, I think we will on some things. You know, I think there might be some issues that aren't necessarily finalized. Like, are we going to send something to county council as a recommended ordinance or language around an ordinance? You know, if that happens, there may not be as many findings, and that part of the table isn't that fleshed out. I don't know, my opinion, not the.
Yeah. Well, this is our, let's revisit that in discussion amongst ourselves in the coming days, because you know, this is still our work in progress, right? So I reckon we need to keep working on it and see where we land on that.
Okay.
I don't feel strongly about it. In other words, Kyle, I mean, let's just we'll keep chipping away at this and see. I think for Randy's purposes, though, we want to share with him the findings, right? As well as the proposed amendment when we,
All
so
of
for
it,
example,
all of it.
yeah, so for example, when I would capture the issues, the proposed amendment and the findings and put that in a document for him to look at.
I think here with this, I don't know that you need to create, anyone needs anything more for Randy, for what that's worth.
Well, what I meant
The
was,
presentation thing, go ahead.
sorry, what I meant was if I'm going to send him tomorrow, for example, this one proposed amendment on section on non-discrimination, I would send him just a sort of a quick memo, so to speak, that I would just copy and paste what is in this table for that, and just dump it off to him. You know what I mean?
Okay.
I don't want to send him this table in its current form. That I'm not comfortable with that.
Okay.
Is that okay? Do you guys have a view on that?
I don't have strong feeling. I think, I mean, you're the author, it's fine. I feel like it's
We're
the
creating-
content,
Yeah.
content more than the delivery at this point that we want them to look through, and
Yeah.
the findings are sufficiently included to support that. And I wouldn't do a lot of extra work. If
Yeah.
it was me, I wouldn't do more work for Randy's benefit. He'll
But you-
return it in that format. So,
Yeah.
but if you want to,
Are you
I have no
suggesting
problem.
then you would just send them the table even though it's incomplete and sort of let them see everything?
well, I don't know what complete looks like. I think with all these, if we weren't going to report for another 3 or 4 weeks, there might be that many weeks worth extra findings we put in there. I mean, at some point, it just has to be done enough. He just wants to comment on it. It just has to be done
Okay.
enough at this point to either
Okay,
pass the majority of the commission or not. So,
fair enough. Okay. All right. Well, let us proceed if that's okay. So for this guy, this body, I wanted to propose to you all that we give it a slight renaming. And this is because I asked Judy Scott what she thought about the name of the commission. And I heard her in terms of, keep it in sync with the naming of that resolution. And so I thought, let us call it a Justice, Equity, and Inclusion. And then I added the word Review Commission. Because I was in the composition and mandate discussion piece I shared with you some time ago, I was realizing that there was this law and justice review body that was created by Pierce County. And if indeed what we want to be doing is having this body be a body that can review different aspects of what the county government is doing around justice, equity, and inclusion, I think we should call it that kind of thing. Additionally, when I talked to Mac's colleague in King County, who's a policy, he's a person who develops policy. He cautioned us about oversight for the reasons that they're getting caught up in King County, which is oversight sometimes implies having investigative powers, and their body still can't. It doesn't have the authority to subpoena anything, right. And so he said, I would suggest you propose a body that has the power, if you will, to review performance, actually, is what he was talking about. And so be a bit of a, not a formal, but an informal auditing entity. And so that's why I opt for the word review. And that would be something it does on an ongoing basis, and it can do reporting as well. And anyway, and then just taking diversity out and just having JEI in there. And now the problem with that is it could be pronounced the Jerk Commission, but that's okay. Sorry, does anyone want to laugh? I thought that was kind of funny.
out it goes. Jane, I see what you're after there, and I don't disagree. With my first strike, and I'd love to, and I realized I didn't call on Linnea at the 10-minute mark. I can see the pathway to reviewing departments' activities or departmental behaviors. I think a review capacity of individuals, especially ones that are potentially, electeds or find some of their power through, the state side of their job description. That might be a little bit more. I think it would need to be pretty intensely prescriptive if we did that.
So
I don't disagree that we might want that capacity to, to kind of refine and re-steer those different ships, but departments. And I think the judge and Linnea talked about this before.
So thank you. Thanks for that, Kyle, because I absolutely thought about that. And when I was looking at what that Pierce County review body did, it didn't go into those offices of elected officials and start conducting an audit. It asked them to sort of report to the commission. So it's like, okay, so what can you tell us about the things that you're doing in your office to advance these issues, given that there's a resolution that exists, given that there's a non-discrimination section in the charter? And so I hear you completely. And so that body didn't go in and review those offices. It asked it for information sort of to conduct its own internal look and provide a report back to the body, the review commission.
Do you feel personally like that's a sufficient methodology or mechanism to get at what you're after when you think about it? Is that I'm just asking.
I do. I think it is sufficient. I think what's going to be absolutely critical is the cultivation of a relationship of partnership between this body and the government, and not an antagonistic relationship, a relationship that upholds collaboration and support rather than scrutiny. And so I think that's what's going to be important, because what Mac's assistant said was, well, what's going to incentivize these offices to do this work? And we talked about that, and it's, well, this body will be reporting to the citizens in the county who vote for these people, and if it's, it can negatively report on them, and that's going to be persuasive. So
can you scroll down? I'm trying to remember how we articulated what the membership would be. Oh, it's not in there.
Well, that's in a different document. Do you want me to pull that up, or not right now?
Well, just for the sake of conversation in this body, I think who does sit on the commission really is relevant then, and whether how you define the review term makes a difference. So,
well, yeah, and as it happens, that body in Pierce County, the person who led it was the former Superior Court judge. He was the chair.
But was that just happenstance based on who that person wasn't sought out, right? Or that position wasn't.
I imagine that person was definitely sought out, and it was a time limited body. It issued a presentation and a report. That's what I shared with you guys previously, and then it made all manner of recommendations of major gaps in the county government on this stuff, and then it identified what those gaps were, and then put that back to council to figure out what they wanted to do about it, and then it disbanded.
Well, I really like the direction that you've gotten some input on, certainly, but the direction that you're thinking here with review, I really feel like anything more than what we have is excellent. If it's a standing commission, I think within a year's time or 2 years' time, it will have a profound impact. How it reviews and how it does its job, and who the people are that have to be sort of reported to is just that much more important, or that much more critical.
Absolutely, and for sure. And that's why when we put this to Randy, and this is what I hoped that maybe Kyle could do a little digging for us on, but I did get some input on this from Patrick, Mac's colleague in King County. He said the most important stuff about this commission in terms of its composition and mandate must be in the charter. The accompaniment gets, by ordinance, gets put into the code. The accompanying material in terms of you know, the finer details. And he said, but, an ordinance is not charter, right? In
Yeah,
terms of the hierarchy, right?
Right.
So he said, just make sure that, the most important, most critical elements of this body are written into the charter.
Okay, I had to stop and acknowledge that it's a little after 5:30. This is for some reason, this feels like some of the most intent work we've done on this. I don't know why, but this is
Because
the
it is.
this will make the difference. I think these ingredients specifically. And I don't know if you're asking this, Jane, but when I look at it, I'm like, is this ready for Randy's attention? Is there enough worked out? Maybe this is a great place for him to have, or for somebody like him in a role like that to have some input. Maybe then it sits with a Kyle Loring for a while. I see your point there, and then we hold off for now. Sharon?
Yeah, I would like for Linnea to see what I put in there from her email to see if I've done this in a proper way, because I'm really not sure.
Okay, that you're talking about the onboarding thing?
We're not.
We're not there.
You mean for time before she leaves?
Yeah.
You want to move to that?
Yeah,
Okay.
if that's okay.
Any more to say, Jane, about did you get the information you needed from us?
Yes, so this is a work in progress, and this is a point where I would, whenever Kyle can jump on board, like I may still do a little chipping away at this before he finally gets his contract. I would get him on the phone and I would talk very specifically about what we would need help with in this regard. So I would guide him. I wouldn't get him to go flailing around doing stuff that's not relevant. So I would be very clear in what we needed his help with. And it's not a lot actually at this point, to be honest with you. I feel like a lot of the work I've done, and by the way, I did speak with this lawyer, Steve DiGiulio, today about the Civil Service Commission of the Sheriff's Office, and it just reinforces why we want to create this body.
It was helpful conversation.
Very helpful, yeah. So to Sharon's point about the onboarding, I have a question for you guys about that. I am not convinced yet, and I think I'd rather actually I spoke to James Wolfe today, but I'd rather send him an email on this issue, because I am not 100% convinced that it is the charter where we should be talking about that. I feel like that may more lie in a recommendation to the county council, and I would like James Wolfe's view on that, because I don't necessarily agree that this is stuff that needs to be in the charter. But I'm open to certainly some discussion of that. I recognize its importance, but your thoughts, you guys?
I guess right now, after you say that, I was thinking weeks ago that was going to be, there were a couple of questions that might go back across his desk or through his office, and that was one of them. I guess I wanted to hear more from both of you, or from Sharon specifically, because in terms of onboarding, I wasn't 100% sure if this applied to any and all. I struggled even with how to put it into the agenda. So it's meant to be staff, and I had some question about whether or not it's for any and all department heads who are appointed, and then how it gets handled for electeds, or if it gets dealt with in that way at all. I think what I asked before was, do the shop stewards or some of the union people have an appropriate seat at this table? And that was a question for Mr. Wolfe. If the county did this and we tackled it in a more structured format, would the unions have anything to say about that piece? And should they be in the upfront conversation when we're formulating, or should this just be handled by HR? So I think I'm 100% behind you talking with him about that piece. And we haven't asked Linnea here to talk to that, talk about that today, but I don't know the mechanism that we included in as an amendment, frankly. Jane?
Yeah, and I'm gonna kick the can over to Sharon here now. If we do have a follow-on with James Wolfe, Sharon, I think you'd be well placed now, because you were looking at this a fair bit. You'd be well placed to have a chat with James about that, to understand a little bit more that onboarding process. And you could share that we've received some input from Linnea Anderson on that, and ask him about it, because that is actually what I talked to him a bit about today on some of the personnel stuff. Because Sharon and I were a bit stuck on that. So I got some
Okay.
clarification from him today on some stuff further down in our chart.
Okay, is that enough on Article 10, the Article 10 section for now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so Sharon, do you want to follow up with James on that tomorrow, maybe?
Sure.
Awesome, that'd be fantastic.
And is it fair to say, I guess, Linnea, if you have other input that you haven't shared so far, is it okay that she sends that to Sharon for
Oh gosh, of course. Thank you so much
conversation?
for asking the question. You know, honestly, this was something that was raised and kind of spoken about informally with some of my colleagues, both appointed department heads and other electeds. And, you know, it was inspired by the conversation that you wanted to tighten, or there's the notion that the Charter Review Commission wants to tighten a definition of what that onboarding process looks like for the Charter Review Commission. And so that's just where I thought, like, okay, here's an opportunity to break down a silo. Here's an
Yeah.
opportunity where you could perhaps establish minimum standards for the various
board.
onboarding across the board to make a more effective and efficient and welcoming county government.
Awesome.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
I understood where that wording and all that was coming from when I reread your email. Yeah, that it was sort of like, okay, well, it's not just for the commission, it's also, it would be helpful for the whole government. Yeah. And that, for me, that falls squarely in the HR manager's remit, unless he thinks that something that was said in the charter would be important. And that's what you'd want to ask him, I think, Sharon, is should there be something about this in the charter if we are revising the text of the charter with regard to, you know, the striking of the initiation of the CRC itself and how that happens, right? Should there be something in the charter about that for, yeah, in terms of bringing new staff persons in?
For the CRC and for the
Sharon,
rest,
do you,
for the CRC and the rest of the county government?
Well, he may not be aware that we're proposing some amendments to this section of the charter that talks about reestablishing the CRC and the sort of the things that govern that. So he may not be aware of that, and you can just say, you can just give him that background and say, well, the CRC is going to be proposing some amendments to this section of the charter that talks about the reestablishment of a CRC and what happens during that process. And there's been, you know, we've had some discussion as to whether there would appropriately be a similar kind of proposed amendment for some language related to the hiring of staff and the introduction of new staff to the county government. That's kind of how I would word it, something like that.
Sharon, do you have the tools you need to have that conversation then in the next few days,
I believe so.
or the questions? Okay.
Okay, excellent. So what I wanted to share with you guys on this one, on the personnel system, and Sharon did a little bit of research for me on this, which was really helpful, actually, Sharon, because I was able to use it when I talked to James Wolfe. And Sharon found a line in the Pierce County Charter that talks about, you know, the equal employment opportunity statement being applicable to all offices and all elected and appointed officers, or what have you, in the charter. So I talked that through a little bit with James, and James actually feels that the way our charter is currently worded, it does allow for and he made reference to not just this section, but the section previously, and we spoke to the issue of exemptions. He feels that it's actually well understood that the personnel policy manual of the county government does apply to all staff who are employed by the county government. It doesn't include elected officials themselves, but he said that's well understood. So we don't, further clarification on that isn't needed.
That's a great finding.
Yeah,
And that by
absolutely.
itself is almost the only finding you need, but
Yeah,
I
yeah,
hope that's
exactly.
included. Yeah,
Absolutely. And then when I told him about this notion of including this language, he didn't have an issue with it at all. He feels that, yeah, if it reinforces your proposed non-discrimination section, he said, no problem to mention it again. You know, that non-discrimination section though, from his mind, covers it all, but he's thinking from the human resource manager perspective. So, but he had no issue with this being included. And then, but he asked me to remember that there was that anti-bullying and anti-harassment language that the operations committee is proposing. So I need to make sure that we're dovetailing appropriately with Maureen's, with the operations committee on where they're proposing that be included, because it's not the same place as this. So I'm a little confused by that. So there's clarification needed there.
do you have capacity in your days and week ahead to touch base with Maureen on that? Do you guys have a plan?
Yeah, I'll send her a quick email about it, you know, and hopefully we'll get it cleared up. That's the only way I can think to do it right now. I could actually even, so I could email her on that, and then we could talk about it in the full CRC when they make their presentation, actually.
Which is
Wednesday, I think.
that's right. Okay, let's carry on unless there are
Okay.
any questions on there.
Okay, so personnel board, I had a conversation with, so I wanted to finish fleshing this out a bit. And this was just my wonky idea anyway. So we can, and well, you don't have to delete this from the table, but James convinced me that there would be no need for a personnel board in this county, and that's enough said. I don't need to tell you anything else. I wrote notes. I can reflect those notes and the findings, but basically it's not necessary. I did though also talk to him about the appointment of people to commissions and committees and boards, and I need to have a further conversation with him with the clerk of the county council about that, because there's not a clear process there, other than she receives applications, she prepares them and submits them to council, and then council does what they want with them. So I need to talk to her about that, and that sounds kind of loosey-goosey to me.
Was there any reference to any of that, the boards and commissions and any of that in the document or the work that you got from the manager back when you asked for the statistical stuff? Was board commissions or any of the citizen groups included?
I don't think so. I know what you're talking about. I don't believe so. That would be another data dig for them that I doubt they have time for right now. But you know, we could recommend an analysis of that, frankly.
Well, I guess that the question that comes from the point you just made is anyone ever get refused for a board, for like a voluntary board seat? Most of the time, like I've said many times before, there just aren't enough people in general. So unless there's a contested seat, or in a couple of, like, you know, other boards I ran for or put my name in the hat for, there was the opening was on another island for representation of another island, but no one for multiple years had put their hat in, and they'd rather have another member than have necessary representation, which I was kind of awkward. But
But you were turned down?
No, I was not in, but I didn't necessarily. I said, I feel like I need to represent people from that other island, and that was not the focus, because they hadn't ever had somebody from that island, or they hadn't for a number of years had someone from that island step forward in that role. So that just asks the question: how many people who put their name in for a seat on, say, Parks Commission or the Parks Board or the MRC? How many people are told no thank you for whatever reason?
I don't think it's very many.
Yeah.
And I can get that information from, unless Sharon wants to take that off my plate too and have that conversation with Ingrid Gabriel, I think her name is. Yeah, you want to do that research, I'd love you for it. And I owe you a bottle of wine.
It's a good question for Maureen, because Maureen did some of that work before with Ingrid and before Ingrid, I think.
Did she though? I'm not sure. Did she, Sharon? Do you know?
I don't know.
Yeah. You guys, I feel it's super important. I'm not comfortable with the fact that there's really no oversight of any of that. Like, I don't know. Just given how busy the county councilors are, like so I'm wondering just who's got the watching brief on that, you know?
Word.
And a related point is, you know, I asked James, I said, so is there anything in the advertising that's done for those seats, for those appointed seats that citizens can just throw their hat in for? Is there anything that's encouraging, you know, people of diverse backgrounds or women or people of minority status, like to apply? He has no idea. And he doesn't think there is.
Yeah.
You know, so my point here is, you know, nobody seems to have I don't know what the procedure is for any of this. And it certainly doesn't sound to me like there's any effort whatsoever to, you know, to get any kind of diverse representation on these bodies that are advisory bodies of our local government.
I wonder if there isn't a mechanism maybe offline for us, or one of our final recommendations that we say, you know, the county personnel manual ought to have a chapter or a section that's dedicated to the voluntary positions, the appointed positions, and that it be such and such, or.
Well, you know what? That's a really interesting suggestion, because I mean, honestly, James Wolfe was like, it's not my remit, you know, go talk to Ingrid or Mylene. And I just wrote to Mylene before the meeting, copying Ingrid in, because I wasn't sure who was the right person to talk to about this. And Mylene said, doesn't fall under my responsibility. And Ingrid wrote back, and she only called me Ms. Fuller, by the way, which I was very disappointed by. I expect to be called Commissioner Fuller. Oh, just kidding. She
Wow.
wrote no, I'm riding that Linnea Anderson train as long as I can.
Bring on June 30th for Jane.
No, but so Ingrid, she just wrote me briefly to say, yeah, I accept the applications, I prepare the applications to be submitted to council for review. C'est ça, that's it. Yeah. So now, if Sharon were to have a conversation with her and say, so what is the process? Like what governs it? Strikes me that, you know, because if James Wolfe says it's out of my hands, well, maybe it shouldn't be. You know, maybe there should be something in that personnel policy manual related to this. I don't know, but yeah, we need to do a bit more research on this, because if we're trying to encourage diversity and inclusion in our county, this is a pretty important point. Yeah, Sharon, sorry, Mr. Chair, Sharon.
Please, Sharon, go ahead.
I can take a hint.
I'm not being subtle.
I pretended I didn't hear it the first time, but no, it's okay. Yeah. So you want me to have a conversation with Ingrid?
Yeah. I don't think there's any point in talking to Mylene about this necessarily, although she could provide some of her thoughts, and she's got really good ideas. And she said she's free all day tomorrow if I wanted to follow up. So I can just kick the can over to you, Sharon, and let me know what your best favorite white wine is, and I'm happy to indulge you.
I think I already owe you a bottle of Prosecco, so what the heck, we'll just
we'll call it even. So seriously, so I'll tee you up, Sharon, and then I'll let you go for it, because you clearly did yesterday.
Oh, okay. So what's Ingrid's last name? And you'll send me her contact info.
Exactly. I'll respond to those two guys, and then I'll copy you in. And I think it could be useful talking to them both, just because Mylene, she does have, you know, in that auditor function, she has oversight on certain things, right? So she might be interested that we're asking about this. So I will forward you their contacts, okay?
Yes.
I'll loop you into that exchange I had with them today and set the stage a bit based on my conversation with James.
Thank you, Commissioner Abreu.
Thank you, Commissioner Abreu. You're the best. You're the bomb.
Okay, let's continue to move on. We're doing great work.
Okay, what do you see on my screen now? My personal messages and everything?
Nope, you're still in your document, and the last one is Kevin and I are on addressing findings. And I wanted to show you the language that I found for the land acknowledgement.
Okay, here I am. Thank you. That would be wonderful. So you're on this one then, the purchasing and contract stuff, right?
Yeah. So is that the last two? That one and then
That one,
the,
and then this one, yeah, and then there's this representation one,
the onboarding, right?
and the onboarding, yeah.
Okay, let's keep going. So I'll tell you really quickly, and I think this will, the information on the Attorney General's office, I will make sure I bounce that on to Amy tonight, but I expect more response there. So I looked into you had sent some other information from the People's Initiative, and I think I've shared that so far. It wasn't very helpful. It's pretty limiting. That document or that reference is pretty limiting in how it might help us for putting teeth into few contracts. And Amy made the great point. A lot of what the state says about contracts for state government and jurisdictions smaller than the state is the fiduciary kind of component. And because it's tax money, that's often the number one reference, that
Right.
whoever wins a bid or whoever wins a contract can do so for including prevailing wage when they have to, and can do so for the smallest amount of money to be fiscally responsible. So she wasn't sure. Amy wasn't really sure, and said she would look into it and would kind of expand her own knowledge on specifically like the purchasing side. She thought there might be more capacity for us to kind of draw some lines on that aspect of the county's activities. But a lot of the actual contracts that the county gets into, she felt like there's some fairly specific limitations out of state law. So I will know more there, and will share that with you when I learn it. I will look through the document you shared too, Jane, and inform myself. So your
Okay.
screen changed for me. I've got a
Alrighty.
small.
Okay, hold on, I gotta get rid of this. How do I do that? You guys help me.
You can stop the share.
Stop share at the top, yeah.
Okay, now I'll start the
Yeah.
share again. I want to start the share again?
As long as you got the one you want to pick is up on your desktop somewhere, you should be fine.
Yeah, it is. Okay, so I had a comment on that. I'm sorry, I'm tired.
It's okay. And I think the question, and it may have to go to the municipal research folks on, has any county taken any kind of additional control into their own hands on any of that language? You
Yeah,
run into
okay.
the same problem?
Yeah, I'm frustrated. Help me. Damn it. Oh, wait a
How
minute.
is this one different than what you had up there?
Oh, okay, hold on a sec. I don't know why this is there. Do you guys know why this is there?
How many screens do
Oh,
you
I
have?
got it. I got it. There we go. Go away. Go away. There we go. Okay, Kyle, I did my own some time ago. I did my own little digging into the internet on this, and I've got examples of other counties that actually have very progressive initiatives related to contracting more women-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses. And I shared a couple emails with James and Mike on that because they expressed some interest in doing that kind of thing at the county level. So I will just forward, it's more information for Amy and for you. I'll just forward that to them. So there's no, state law does not prohibit that kind of stuff.
Okay. Did you share that with me already?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. All right.
No, I'm pretty sure I didn't. So I think there's 2 emails I sent to them regarding that, and I will share those. I'll share those with you because there's no need for, you don't want Amy to start from ground zero on this. That's not going to be helpful to her. And by the way, the other person who would be very valuable to run past any proposed amendments with would be Judy Scott, because she's done extensive work in this area at the federal level, and knows what supports there are at the federal level for these kinds of efforts. So she's very, very versed in this responsible contracting is what you call it. So she should be, I would recommend that whatever language we come up with, she gets a chance to take a look at it. Are you guys there?
Sharon, did you have something? You raised your hand for a second.
Oh, when Jane, just as Jane was saying, you forwarded something to them, and I wasn't sure who them was.
James and Mike?
James and Mike Thomas. Okay.
Mike.
Yeah,
Mike
they brought up in our meeting with them the idea that they'd be interested in doing, in having more creative ways of supporting local businesses, including in contracting, including women-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses. And so I was on the internet and I saw some stuff about that other counties have done, and I forwarded that information to them. So I wanted to share that with Kyle to share on with Amy, because again, those are really solid examples of creative things that other counties are doing in this space. Okay, so Kyle, I'll send that on to you.
Okay, well, I'm gonna hold off then on saying too much more about that one. That's something for me to work on this week. In this case, I will get what I find feedback for. I'll get stuff to Amy, and then wait the day or two to hear back from her, and then offline inform the three of you what I hear there, just so we're not waiting for next Monday. Go ahead, Jane.
Yeah, just a reminder that the second part of our non-discrimination clause is specific to contracting. So she should probably look at that language as well.
It's a good reminder.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's cover, 2 minutes to 6, just for everyone's benefit. So I'm gonna, if you stop sharing for a second, I'm just gonna show you what I found with the land acknowledgement.
Excellent. Okay, and by the way, you've got this one in your table as well, the recommendation there on the county council thing. You've got that in your table too, right, Kyle? So you can just screen share for the rest of the meeting.
Yeah, unless you've changed anything, I could, but I was gonna share. Yes, I'll take care of it. I can take care of it. Yeah.
Okay.
Sharon, go ahead.
Yeah. Did you take, Jane? Did you take out what I put in terms of onboarding? Because I don't see it there.
I didn't put it in. I hadn't put it in yet because I thought we were gonna just screen share what we dumped in there. So, but you took, yeah. Did you take the wording word for?
I'm sorry. I took the version you sent me. I added that language, and then I sent you a new version of it backdated May 9th.
Thank you. I saw that this morning. Yeah, and then you pasted really the content of Linnea's email, correct?
Yeah, I mean, we worked a little bit, but it was mainly a list of bullet points. So.
Okay. Well, I will take that though, and I'll still dump it into this version. All right, Sharon?
Sure.
So we have it as a place marker, and then and I'll give you guys the next version tonight of this document.
Okay.
Can you say the first part of that again? So you have language from Sharon that's not in any of these versions?
Yet. Yeah, she
Okay.
related to the onboarding. She took content that Linnea provided, did some tweaking to it. And so
Okay.
I want to populate the next version, which will be version 4, I think. Yeah, version 4. I'll put that in here, and then Kyle, you may or may not be ready for me to dump your stuff in. So why don't you share with us where you're at?
Okay, and are you going to talk about it still, Sharon, tonight, or we're going to table it for a later conversation?
I
The
think
onboarding stuff.
we discussed it already, right? Sharon, you're going to be following up.
Yeah, we talked about, we're not sure whether it's appropriate to go into the charter or not, so we're going to find out.
Yeah, so those will be the conversations
Okay.
she has.
So is that enough?
Okay.
Okay, so on the screen now, hopefully you can see in red. So the county actually has, and I'm waiting back for reply back from one of Kendra's employees about who I've had contact with about this particular acknowledgement. So I had some bad information. So there is in I think most of 2020 during San Juan County Council meetings, the chairman at the time for the year was Rick Hughes, council member Rick Hughes. And Rick would read a statement of land acknowledgement at the beginning of council business when he was actually chairing a meeting. And it turns out that the county never adopted that. That was him acting on his own. He does have space, or he is allowed to make those comments at the beginning as chair, and so did so, and had a version of what's italicized at the bottom that he would read. And a number of people have said, well, what happened to that? That disappeared in 2021. We haven't heard that. And part of that is because it's never been adopted in a formal way by the county. And right now it just sits in the cultural resources part of the environmental services division. But it is there. And I was kind of hoping to hear back from this person a little bit more for this meeting about where it comes from, how it was crafted, what consultations there might have been, and if there's a strong enough ownership of it that people wouldn't want us to change it, or if it was really thought of as sort of ready for prime time. So I don't have those answers. I will by the time we get to this next week. But, and you can read it as well as I can, but let us acknowledge we reside on the ancestral lands and waters of the Coast Salish people who have called this place home since time immemorial, and let us honor inherent Aboriginal and treaty rights that have been passed down from generation to generation. So for obvious reasons, I didn't really want to mess with that. In looking at the Simon Fraser background information and then looking at some of the other county work, there is shockingly little use of any land acknowledgement at the county level in Washington state. So all those resources that you sent me, Jane, most of them, so a few counties in documents of planning commissions, there's been a written statement, very little. So MRSC did a lot of this research and found very little of that. I'm gonna,
Sorry, I think Linnea, you need to mute.
I got her. And so number one, there isn't anything to draw from, to kind of share language or kind of explore how other counties have looked at the tribes that their land areas maybe kind of overlap with. And that's okay. I did need that to run on, but I think it does draw more attention to our desire to include this and the language that's already there. So what I heard from Sam, and I'm not sure I wouldn't make any vast changes just on what he said, but I appreciated the piece about, not, and that's why I asked him. So Coast Salish is, as we already mentioned, is a language family, not so much. So I think if it wasn't tightly owned by somebody or managed, or there wouldn't be feelings of having kind of nudged our nose in where it doesn't belong, I would at least like to use what's there or consider what's using there, and maybe recommend as a list the findings certainly, but as an action of this committee, recommended as part of an ordinance that said, or maybe in some other document we already have, San Juan County will make reference to the land acknowledgement and use it and more actively. Now, I don't have enough experience personally to know how that gets done, what we would say, or what we should represent for its best use. It doesn't do much good to sit on a shelf somewhere and collect dust, which I think is kind of where it is right now. So I wanted to not take forever, but to hear from both of you about what your thoughts are there. Jane.
Yeah, I may be channeling Kevin here, but no, I think this really should be in the charter. I feel very strongly about that, and not sure exactly how we would do that, but I think that, especially talking to James Wolfe today and hearing him comment on the fact that if we're successful in getting an amendment to the charter that includes a non-discrimination section, he said that will carry a lot of weight. And I'm hearing your question.
The land under acknowledgement would carry a lot of weight?
No, the non-discrimination section.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
So we're talking about, well, something related but separate.
Right.
What I'm hearing from him is if it's in the charter, it has a heck of a lot of weight. And so if it were stated in the charter in some appropriate manner that this is something that the county will use in its official meetings as a statement at the beginning, then that's what they will use. It's and if it's an ordinance, it could. I don't know. Anyway, so I'm channeling Kevin here, but I feel pretty strongly about that. Additionally, I heard what Sam said about referring to Indigenous peoples and not Coast Salish peoples, and I'd be inclined to relate to revert to that kind of language. It would be good to get another person's take on that. But if I have also heard from a constituent in my area just 2 days ago that she has also heard a lot recently that Coast Salish is not really that appreciated anymore. And so she's heard the same thing, and it's falling out of favor actually. And the Salish Sea is no, actually she might have been referring to the Salish Sea language. She said there's discussion among the different tribes that that's not necessarily language they like, which she was kind of like, oh boy, back to the drawing board kind of thing. But anyway, I thought it was interesting that Sam kind of echoed something similar in terms of referring to these peoples as these peoples in this way. So then the final thing I wanted to say was a statement of commitment. I think that was an extremely valuable piece of information he shared with us on that, and I think that's. I think if there was some way of including in the charter some language that spoke about efforts to be undertaken to develop a statement of commitment to accompany this acknowledgement, I think we would do well to. Anyway, go ahead, Sharon. Sorry.
No, just saying I agree with that. And, you can have the most wonderful, like Sam was saying, you can have the most wonderful land acknowledgement, but if you're killing the eelgrass, if you're using up the fresh water, really, so yeah.
I don't disagree with that. I think it's worse though to make a commitment that's unmet, and I'm not sure. The charter creates framework, but there's nothing there's no teeth in it that necessarily is restorative or does anything that we wanted to, unless it's managed at some level. And so and that is not well, like we've got that well established right now. So Jane, what?
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Carl. And I think though what I think would be nice, let's say we agree that we want to propose an amendment in the charter that has this kind of language regarding acknowledgement. Could we also not include a section that spoke to that tasked the county council with passing an ordinance on a statement of commitment to accompany this acknowledgement, that would be their responsibility to work out in consultation with representatives of the tribes of this area. So in other words, we wouldn't, because there's work that has to go into doing that, there's right. And that's about relationship building, and that's about restorative justice discussion and all the rest of it. That is not quick term work at all. But I mean, we could throw the gauntlet down and say, the county council shall establish an ordinance that includes a statement of commitment to Indigenous peoples of this area, to accompany the acknowledgement of their, this sovereignty acknowledgement or something like that.
Were you guys going to look at the 31/2020 and tease out any of that, the place name? I think there's some not just acknowledgement, but there's some commitment at that level that is already been expressed, or and certainly not incorporated completely, but still on a burner. And I don't know if you got to it, and there's plenty of other, and we have another week to look at that some, but that was everything from civil rights through, well, I guess this was the difference. 31/2020 didn't include some of that was in the resolution for 21. I sent those both to you, right?
Which one for 21?
The simple one that's proposed, but hasn't been, no action's been
Oh, you
taken
did
on
send
it.
that. You did send that. I didn't get a chance to look at it, but I wanted to.
Yeah, I think some of that commitment, some version of that commitment energy is started there, and maybe that's a starting place.
Well,
There's more work to do.
yeah, that's a really important finding though, Kyle. Absolutely. Like just
Yeah.
you can say there's been discussion about this in the county already, and not just discussion, but work done. But I just wanted to say in 2020, the language that is in the first paragraph that outlines the commitment of this, embodied in this resolution is: we strive to acknowledge, dismantle, and eradicate systemic racism, bigotry, and prejudice for all residents, particularly populations of marginalized identities, such as members of Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So it's already in the resolution that they've made, the county council has made a commitment to this. So to me, this just,
That's one of those. Yeah, it's be it resolved. It is the commitment. I agree. It's the manner in which it's done, and we can resolve, but it has no mechanism by which it gets. I mean, it's
right.
It's a roadmap with no fuel. Sort
It
of.
doesn't, it's not even a roadmap, I'll be honest, not based on what I've learned about it in the work we've been doing. There's not a roadmap. And actually, I even probably have in my notes, Mike Thomas saying they don't have a roadmap. That's part of the problem. And so, to be honest with you, including things like this in the charter begins to become a roadmap by doing things like this, as well as the other stuff that we're chipping away at. It begins to help them focus on what they need to do.
Well, that's the question though, back to that, how to include it. So I see three possible scenarios: an ordinance that is recommended out of our activity, an actual amendment that lives in the charter, which could be everything from its own standalone land acknowledgement / whatever, or it could be chapter 2 of the preamble, or line 2 of the preamble for that matter, or we don't do anything with it, and we don't take any action, but the collective operations of the Justice and Equity Commission, or Justice and Equity Advice, whatever the group ends up being, or the board ends up being of oversight or advisory, takes up the issue and and works on some of that directly. So putting it in the charter is still not specific. So that's what I'd like to figure out with you guys, is where does it live?
Yeah, so I hear you, and we kind of need to get some suggestion on that. But I think, what you just say here in your findings, Washington counties have a verbal sovereignty statement in use at the beginning of most county business. I think, how amazing would it be if we weren't identified as a county charter government that actually enshrined in its county charter these values and stated it's in that manner, that and where does this live? It can be in general provisions. It can be in the general provisions of it could fall under, hell, for that matter, let's create an article. I'm being a bit facetious here, but it should live where our other work is living in the charter. There should be a thread that holds them together. And I just and yes, at that stage we need to talk to Randy and get advice on how to build this stuff into the charter. But okay, now now I can hear Kevin screaming in my ear right now. I feel very strongly this should be in the charter.
Okay, well, I commit for next meeting to have this a little bit more thought through, certainly more findings, and then some concrete choices to pick from, at least.
Cool.
So I think as a standalone ordinance, it's not going to fly. If the resolution, the scoped, the proposed amendment, or the proposed ordinance that's been already shared for 2021, if another piece was added in there, another bullet, that would be one avenue. Don't know if it's the right one or not, but I'll look into that a little bit more for this specific piece. And I'll know by then, or I'll know before then, if playing with it at all is going to put somebody out that did the work already.
You know, if Rick Hughes,
Okay.
sorry, Kyle, if Rick Hughes came up with this, I think you want to call him and find out the history.
I talked to him already.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I talked to him today. Yeah.
Good, excellent,
Yeah,
excellent.
I
Well
did.
done. Fantastic. And does he have any thoughts on the idea of putting this in the charter?
Well, he, he has the same question really that we do. He said, I didn't really ask my co-counsel whether or not they were interested in it. I just did it because I, spent a lot of time with the chairperson of the Islands Trust, which is our part of the BC counterpart, and it's important to me, and so I included it. But I sort of, my word, his, absconded with one line from somebody's and another line from what I had seen that I've referred to here. So I think he's got interest in it, but how to mechanically do it, I didn't get that from him. So
Okay,
yeah,
one more question, you guys. Can you remind me if the Environment and Climate Change Committee is proposing a new article in our charter related to environment and climate change? Is that what they're proposing? Do you know?
it's an amendment that creates a new office, and you mean on top of that?
No.
Any separate articles?
What I'm talking about, I'm talking about where it is built into the charter. I'm talking about, is it a new article on environment and climate change? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so.
Because if it is, I would suggest that we have a new article that refers to justice, equity, and inclusion. We go bold. That's I don't know, because everything that we're doing then could fall under that. I don't know. I mean, we'd need to get legal advice on that, but I've seen some pretty interesting things in the tables of contents of the various charters I've been looking at. And if they're creating an article on environment and climate change, then let's create an article on justice, equity, and inclusion.
It's not, I don't know what Anne Marie's thoughts are, but I don't see it. I'm just looking through the document that she has for presentation to the general body on Wednesday, and there's charter sections.
It's a good question because I don't remember.
Section 5.10, so that's an existing section already, and then it's in the findings. So maybe there's a plan to wait for Randy's office to advise them on that level, or if there's more to it, then I don't know.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, Kyle. This is like new section, and then
yeah.
I
okay,
see.
for time, okay. You guys, I'm going to keep us moving because that's all questions you can ask offline.
Yep.
So have we covered everything on the onboarding to our satisfaction?
Yeah, I think Sharon, you're going to follow up. Go ahead, Sharon.
For now, I think so. The language isn't there right now, and I think I need to look into that. So whether it belongs to the charter at all, right?
Okay, so I think the last piece for conversation today is if there's anything to be said about the Law and Justice Council.
Yeah, so that's what I discussed with Linnea today. And I think, where I'm beginning to land on this is that that it would be worthwhile to have citizen representation, but perhaps just in one person. And something we talked about together was the idea that the person who chairs the Justice, Equity, and Inclusion Review Commission, that chair sit on this body and be a seat at that table. That strikes me as being the most logical representative to be present. So that's
would that have to be changed in code then in that specific section in your mind?
Yes.
Yeah.
It would be, absolutely. Okay. It would have to be. And then the other thing, and this is really more recommendation oriented, because I want to make it a formal recommendation to the county council, is that Law and Justice Council it needs to become more formal in terms of how it conducts its business, in terms of that information being publicly available. It's not on the county website, and they acknowledge that, and they don't have proper minutes. They don't, there's no reporting that's publicly available. So there's no transparency and accountability in that body whatsoever. And so that's not appropriate, and that needs to be conveyed to the county council.
What happened to your thinking on representing the separate districts, other than just more people?
Well, that my stepping away from that comes from talking to Linnea about how kind of unwieldy it can get. I mean, given that we're such a small council, and a county rather, in terms of our population size, and so it's a bit unwieldy to have that many representatives on this body, and I feel like that Justice, Equity, and Inclusion Review Commission would be the body through which citizens would want to have a voice on that council. They can also have a voice on that council directly, although nobody even knows it exists. But so I mean, I kind of take Linnea's point that it'll start getting rather large if we start getting representation from all these different districts.
So you're saying it just needs the chair of the jerk to function. That's all.
Uh-oh.
Is that what you're saying? That's what you said. That's what you said a couple times now.
No, Jersh. We'll call it the Jersh.
The jersh.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. That's what I would recommend.
Before you send this out, are you going to add that into your thinking into the recommendation section? Is that your thought?
Yeah.
Kind of retool that. Okay.
Yeah, during my sleep. Yeah.
Okay. So any new business then on top of all this?
Yeah,
This is
I'd like
monumental.
to know if I could bill my daily rate to the Credit Review Commission for the time.
I think Kyle Loring's line item was what, 5,000?
Yeah. Man, oh man.
Chip away at that.
Yeah, nice of him, I must say. I feel his pain. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, you guys, this feels pretty, I don't know, this feels pretty cool.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because I feel like you've been the hardest on yourself in the process, and I think it's monumental and coming together quite nicely.
I think
And
so.
you know, some of it is to some extent, I'll say, for me, choking down a little bit of what isn't going to, you know, what's maybe too broad right now, but there's some really great stuff here despite that. So, and if all of those pieces are allowed to work in the way that I think we're envisioning, it's chapters further down the road. And
For sure.
it's not a selling out for me. It's not that, oh, well, that's enough, but we're talking about a number of new people or a number of new eyeballs on the circumstances, and some really great stuff that meets those original issues that got us into this first place to begin with. So
no, and I think it creates a foundation for the culture shift and mindset shift we're aiming for, it has the potential to be very transformational and give people the feeling that they're living in a slightly different county.
You know, I think that's if you could capture that or read through the minutes or watch the video over and over again, that's a great lead in for the presentation. I mean, that's really what's at the heart of it. So
absolutely, yeah, and I think the commissioners will support this. That's my impression. Yeah.
Okay. Got your question answered then about format for I don't have strong feelings on how to send it to Randy. I don't think it matters if it's pretty close to what's here. So all of us have pretty some different assignments for the next week. I commit to putting the stuff that I find to you before Monday. And Jane, if you're busy enough and you need me to chair next week, we can do that. Especially if you're going to do the presentation, we could talk about that if you want to.
Yeah, actually, I just realized I'll need you to chair next week because I'm in transit. I'm going to be on my way home, so I'll be lucky if I can be on the meeting on my phone. But
so we should talk about what needs to what'll need to be, let's work on the agenda together. That way I can make sure all of your stuff is reflected.
And I wonder if we could just think about whether we need a working session on Friday, say Friday afternoon or something, for an hour, like a really tight work session or something. Just because there's a lot of little pieces that got to come together here. And I mean, we may find we don't need as much of Kyle's help as we thought we did. I don't know.
Okay. I'll keep that
Yeah.
in mind.
Um,
Aaron, anything else for the order? Nothing. I don't think you've blinked in about 5 minutes. Like you.
Me? Oh, it's just
Yeah.
the glass. It's just the reflection of the glasses.
There you go. It feels like Friday and Monday. It's going to be another long week.
mm,
That's
Okay.
what happens when you work over the
Any
weekend.
other? Is it what?
That's what happens when you work over the weekend.
mm,
Okay.
mm.
Anyone move to adjourn?
I move to adjourn the meeting, please.
Okay. I'm going to stop sharing and stop the recording and send my thanks to you, Mrs. Anderson. Again, Linnea, thank you so much for joining us yet again and contributing. And